Section 2.13, Scope. The scope of a variable is the part of the program where that variable can be accessed. The scope of a variable begins when that variable is declared. So a variable, in other words, cannot be accessed before it's declared. And the scope of a variable ends with the closing curly brace that contains the declaration. So a variable has to be within this range between being declared and the closing curly brace where it is declared to be in scope. And a variable can only be used if it's in scope. So to make things a little more concrete, let's take a look at a program that intentionally contains a scope error. Here's our program, and one thing you might notice right away is in line 5, values being underlined. What's the scope of that variable value? Well, the scope of a variable starts in the line where it's declared and ends with the closing curly brace that contains the declaration. So that means the scope of this variable value starts in line 6 and ends in line 9. That's the part of the program where value is in scope. In line 5, value is not in scope yet. It's out of scope. So when we try to use value in line 5, we end up with a scope error. We can hover over line 5 and we'll see that Visual Studio is telling us identifier value is undefined. Well, we know that we can't use a variable before it's declared because it would be out of scope. And that's exactly what's going on here. So can you see what could we do, what change could we make to fix this scope error? Well, there are a number of possible approaches, but one would be to switch lines 5 and 6. Now values declared in line 5, and so its scope goes from line 5 to line 9. And therefore it is in scope in line 6 when we use it. So that'll fix the error, and we can run the program. Go ahead and compile it and run it. Oh, and here we see values 99. Press any key to continue, and it's not optimal because there's not a new line there, so we can just add that in. So there's a scope error, but then there's also this little logical error of not printing out a new line after value. So let's go ahead and add an end L right here and run it again. But just to be clear, so the scope error we fixed, but then we had a different error, or kind of a smaller error that we'll fix right now, just in the formatting.